let's get started. Welcome everyone, good morning. It's almost noon. I have the distinct pleasure of being between you and lunch, which is not always a great thing, but we'll figure that out. Welcome to Build 2012. Welcome to Redmond. For those of you whose this is your first time in Redmond, hopefully you appreciate the weather here. It's too early to do weather jokes because it's still going on over on the East Coast, so I'll stay away from that for a while. Maybe by the end of the week we can make jokes about that. My name is Shai Hinitz. I am a senior program manager on the Windows ecosystem team. I'm focused on graphics-intensive applications and games. I'm really passionate about interactive experiences, things that cause people to feel emotions or impact purchase decisions, like games, for example. Can you hear me in the back? I'll tap dance while they're figuring it out. Is it okay now? Okay, great. So my job is to make sure that Windows 8 has great games of all types, of all genres, make sure that the platform has everything that it needs to get games to the market. I have the pleasure of working with some of the best designers, some of the most talented developers and publishers in the world to shape the Windows gaming platform. I reviewed some of the games that you see in the store today and continue to work with these developers to make sure that new games come to the platform quickly and as often as possible. I've also judged some of the app contests. And so through these engagements, the team and I have developed game design principles and best practices to show you how to bring your games to Windows 8. If you've been wondering how to make a great Windows 8 game and what the design principles mean for a game and how to take advantage of the wide range of devices that Windows 8 will run on, well, you're in the right place. In this session, we'll cover how to apply the Windows 8 design principles and guidelines to your game. I'll be showing you lots of demonstrations and lots of different examples to hopefully inspire you to think about what it means for your game as well. This talk will help you make some upfront decisions now so that you can save a lot of time coding, hopefully, later. We'll cover ways to get players' attention and keep them engaged for as long as possible, both inside your game while they're playing it, and also when they're not playing your game while they're doing other activities. We'll look at the different types of interaction models that exist on the platform and what they mean to the different types of game genres. And then I'll show you how to take advantage of the different Windows features, some of the new features that are on the platform, to make your game really stand out, to make it really shine and successful on the platform. I forgot to ask you to set your phones to stun, so maybe you want to do that now. And then at the end, we'll talk a little bit about identity and connectivity to gamer services and what that means to gameplay and how you can take advantage of those capabilities in your game as well. Okay, so let's get started. The first thing that I want to show you is my start screen. As soon as I unlock my machine. So here you see my start screen. These are all the tiles of the games that I care about most that I placed here specifically. This is my personal start screen. It's arranged in the way I like it, with the content that's important to me front and center. Now these tiles are one of the first things that you will see when you start or resume your PC. They're alive with activity. They're always rotating and always cycling through different information. They're switching between images or text or badges or a combination of all of those. In fact, we have about 25 templates that you can choose from to combine the different types of information that can be displayed on the different tiles. But what can you do in a game with this beautiful visual candy? Well, you can take advantage of it to invite users back into your game to play again, or to keep them engaged for longer. You can encourage them with showing them scores, either their own high score or maybe someone else's high score who beat them, or achievements, either those that they've achieved or ones that they have yet to achieve. You can display whose turn it is in a match or a challenge. You can display the next mission they need to accomplish. Anything that will encourage them to go back into the game and continue playing for more. You can also use secondary tiles and pin them to the start screen for a checkpoint in the game, or having concurrent sessions of the game played at the same time, starting from different parts of the game, if that's what people want to do. Remember that there's an opportunity here to engage with the customer, with the player, even when they're not in the game. So this is like a free opportunity to get their attention and really bring them back into your game and start again, and start playing the game again. This service is handled by the Windows Live backend, which can scale to the hundreds of millions of potential players that you can deliver your game to. So you don't have to worry about any of the servers or any of the services that need to be set up for all this stuff. We take care of all of that for you. Now, there are other ways that you can... oh, sorry, I forgot to mention that there are different kinds of tiles. Let me just go back here, and you see that these square ones are more static and don't have the different updates. And then these tiles with the borders around them are what desktop applications look like when we install them on Windows 8. So those are the different types of styles of tiles that you can see. Now, there are other ways that you can notify players about important things that are going on, and that is using notifications. These are opportunities for you to engage with the user again, with the player once more. Typically, this is done within the game, so this is how you would perhaps notify them that they have reached a milestone, or achieved a high score, or solved some puzzle. Or if there's someone who is challenging them to perhaps a mission or something like that. In this case, the notification is showing me that I have not successfully connected to the game service that I'm subscribing to. Now, notifications themselves aren't specifically new to Windows. We've had those for a long time. But in Windows 8, for the first time, unlike in the past, the platform offers a unified way to manage and display them for all Windows Store apps in a consistent and really easy to use kind of way. And the benefit of this is that there's even more opportunity to engage with players and to take advantage of this type of service to notify them of, again, things that are happening in the game or things that are happening outside the game. For example, high scores, achievements, who's challenging them to a match. Perhaps there's a new update available to the game. Perhaps there's some new content that they can purchase or download, and so on. So let's now talk about actually playing the game. And launching your game is the first thing that's going to happen. And the process of launching the game is actually really important, because this is when the OS hands off functionality from the operating system to your application. So the first thing that happens is that the OS displays the splash screen image. This is the image that you submitted as part of your certification process. As soon as the OS displays this image, it hands off control to your application, and then your application has to start processing messages really quickly, or else the system might think that your application is not stable or there's something wrong with it. So the first thing that you want to do is display a very similar splash screen, perhaps the exact same image or something slightly different, and then start loading all of your assets in the background to start the first gameplay screen. While you are doing that, it's a good idea to show a progress bar or some type of entertaining animation that will keep people engaged and not let them think that something's wrong and that the system has stalled. So I'd like to show you my favorite example of a splash screen. So we'll go back to my machine here. And it is Pinball Effects 2. This is another game that I helped bring into the store. So first thing you see is the Microsoft Studios logo. Then that's replaced with the developer's logo. And then they have this cool sparkler effect that writes the number 2 on, brings the entire game's logo on screen, and all the while, all the assets that are required to play this game have been loading in the background. And before I know it, the game is already to launch. So I really didn't notice any time passing there at all. This is a great example of how to bring up a great splash screen. Okay, so hopefully you noticed how that worked, and you can start thinking about ideas that are good for your game and start thinking about how you can apply some of these methodologies in your case. Again, this is an opportunity not just to cover up the fact that you're loading assets, but it's an opportunity for engagement. It's an opportunity to interest the user, maybe inform them of something, perhaps challenge them to something that's related to the game. Okay, so once your game has launched successfully, the first thing that the user will see, the first thing that the player will experience is the landing page. And we've seen in our experience that there are basically 2 types of pages, 2 types of layouts that are good to use. One is what we call the hub or the hierarchical layout, and the other one is the flat experience, and we'll talk about that in a second. Let's talk first about the hub or the hierarchical experience. Just so you know, the timer's not working up here. So in the hierarchical experience, we have the opportunity to lay out all the different interesting things that the user will see and the user might want to do at first play. These are different types of games, perhaps, that are all related to each other, or different experiences like checking out the leaderboards or the high scores, or any new content that's available. All of these things are organized in a scrolling fashion where the content bleeds off to the side, indicating that there's more available, and with a little bounce animation at the end to know that you've reached the end of the content. Again, the opportunity here is to show different kinds of experiences, and let me show you one of my favorite hubs or hierarchical screens, and it is with Solitaire. So here you can see the Solitaire hub. First we have all the different types of games, then the opportunity to modify your theme, then all the different awards you can have, and you can see how it's consistently scrolling off to the same direction, which conforms perfectly to the Windows 8 design guidance. There's also the opportunity here to show an advertisement, as we saw in the keynote earlier this morning, and this also uses semantic zoom really well to let me jump back and forth to different specific locations in the hierarchy if I want to. And of course I can choose to start playing a game and begin playing from there. So that's a great example of the hub or the hierarchical layout. The second kind of layout that we have is what we refer to as the flat layout. This is really good for cases where the game really doesn't have a lot of variations, a lot of different experiences. You basically just want to jump in and start playing the game right away. Typically these are puzzles or board games or games that have, playing with a single image or not that much content. What's important to remember here is that all of the content, all of the affordances for playing the game should probably be available either on screen for the primary controls or hidden away in an app bar for the secondary controls. I'd like to show you an example of a flat screen layout. And this is another game called Puzzle Touch. If you haven't tried it yet, please give it a try because it's in the store. So here you can see I've started playing right away. I have all the pieces of the puzzle here. That's solving a puzzle during a session, maybe not a good idea, but I'll try it anyway. And then I would just keep going as I needed to. If I wanted to undo, there's an undo affordance here on the top left. And if I wanted to get to some secondary controls, they're hidden away here in the app bar, which is really nice. So that's a great example of the flat layout. So did you notice the way that the puzzle pieces were laid out on the screen and I could begin playing right away? That's sort of the key to that interaction. And then did you notice how the pieces really followed my finger and tracked where I was touching really nicely? Well, that's what we call interaction. And in gameplay, there needs to be all sorts of different interactions. And direct manipulation of the content with the finger, with touch, is really the best and most intuitive and natural way to interact with content in your game. So, for example, if you have a character, you can point to where you want that character to go. Or if you have a door or a window, you can tap on the handle to open it or shut it. Or if you want to cut some fruit or a rope, you can just swipe across the screen. And that's really a great way to interact with the game. So Windows 8 has really good built-in support for direct manipulation with touch. It has a library of gestures that you can take advantage of, or you can capture the raw touch input and manage it yourself if you wish. Of course, applications and games need to be touch-enabled first, but they should also support mouse or keyboard because you never know if the device that your player is on will actually have touch or not. Luckily, this is really easy in the API because there's a single API that consolidates touch, mouse, and pen into a single API. If any of those three types of inputs fire, the same API will work for you. So you don't have a lot of work coding special cases for all those three different types of input, which is really helpful. Another thing to think about when we talk about interactions is how to guide the user carefully through purchase opportunities. So the freemium model for games is now becoming very, very popular. In order for that to succeed, in order for you to monetize, you need to know when exactly is a great time for you to provide an interaction that will trigger a purchase of some type of content or some type of experience. So I'd like to go back to Solitaire again. And demonstrate that for you here. So here I am using touch to play the game. And you can see the on-screen affordance for undoing. Of course, I could use a pen as well. Or in this case, I'll use a mouse. And here they're using that API that captures all three different types. But they've also gone above and beyond and allowed you to use a keyboard too. So here I can press space, and then I'm using a keyboard as well. So that's a great example of taking advantage of the different kinds of gameplay interactions that exist on the screen. So some of the examples that we've seen during the certification of applications that are not good and things that you want to make sure you stay away from are putting controls that aren't really mandatory on the screen itself, on the gameplay surface itself. That's really prime real estate that you want to save for the beautiful content of your game, that you want to make sure fills the screen as much as possible. Only things that are absolutely necessary should go on the screen itself. If it's not absolutely necessary, you should put it in an app bar, which has a quick affordance by just swiping up from the bottom or the top of the screen. Okay, sorry about this. Hopefully somebody can figure it out. So Touch is obviously a really important part of the experience in Windows 8, but it's really exciting to see all the new types of PCs that are coming out. Hopefully you got a chance to see them this morning in the keynote, or have visited one of the stores already and seen what's available, because touch is just one of the types of affordances that are available. There's all kinds of other inputs and sensors that are available in these new devices. Of course, touch is part of that, and any Windows 8 certified machine will have at least 5 touch points, but there are many devices that have 10. And we've seen some really cool usage of 10-finger input device games that take advantage of that. Like, for example, 4 people can be playing all around different sides of the device at the same time. But there's also sensors like accelerometer, gyros, inclinometer, compass, GPS, camera, microphone, and of course, you can always connect an Xbox controller to all the devices because they all have a USB port, which is awesome, especially for games. So what can you do with all the sensors, though? How do you take advantage of all that capability inside of a game? Well, this is really the opportunity for the game designer to be creative, to be innovative, and brainstorm about different ideas. So, for example, you can use the accelerometer for steering a car or a boat, or for tilting a table, like a labyrinth game. Of course, that's obvious, but hopefully you guys can come up with really creative ideas above and beyond that. You can also use the device movement to rotate or steer a character around a maze or different parts of a level in a game. I've also seen really great usage of that type of interaction to manage the camera. So a third-person camera flying around is also really a good use of that. There's also a new technology in Windows 8 called sensor fusion, which combines the input of the accelerometer and the gyro and the inclinometer to provide a really precise location data that you can take advantage of for looking around in a virtual room for like a hidden object game. Or I've seen somebody take the input of the camera and then place 3D objects in space that register with the camera to give like an augmented reality experience. It's really cool. There's also the ability of taking advantage of things like shake. So when people shake the device, it's a way to, say, release yourself from the clutches of an evil enemy or a zombie. And if you remember the Etch-a-Sketch, when you shook it over your head, that was like a way to clear the screen or perhaps start over in a game, that kind of affordance. Okay, so here I am showing you Reckless Racing, which is a great example of a game that's done the right thing with input. I'll start a new game. And you see that it'll give me a nice countdown to begin with. I'll start with the keyboard. So here I am racing. I'm not an expert at this game, so I apologize. But you can see that keyboard works really well. And then, if I'd like to, I can switch to touch as well. And as soon as I switch to touch, you can see that these on-screen affordances come on that show me where to touch to play the game. And if I go back to the keyboard, those affordances go off, leaving all the room on the screen for the content, which is beautiful. This game is also set up to use the Xbox controller. And here I am now using the Xbox controller. And you can see I haven't had to change any settings or go to any controls or options. I just play with any of the inputs that I want at any time, and the game just responds beautifully. So that's a great example of that kind of interaction. Going back to this issue of using sensors, this is a great opportunity to innovate and come up with some cool usage of the new form factors that are coming out, and I highly encourage you to do that, because that's really what's going to make your game stand out compared to all the other ones that are in the market. Okay, next to talk about is contracts. So we've been talking a lot about contracts since Build last year, actually. This is the opportunity for applications to take advantage of functionality from other applications and therefore making them work better together with each other. This is like free functionality without coding it yourself. It's kind of really cool. And that increased functionality is increased value, and of course, increased value hopefully translates into increased adoption of your game. But it isn't really clear, unless you've given it a lot of thought, what games can do with these types of contracts. How can they take advantage of them to deliver this type of functionality to games? Well, there's some obvious ones that, if you think about it for a little bit, you might guess. Like, for example, you can search for different kinds of achievements, or a high score, or search for help on how to solve a certain puzzle or type of game level that you're stuck on. You can also search for fun facts, and you can search for information about the game or credits or anything else that will help increase engagement and keep the user engaged for longer inside the game. The same applies to sharing. You can take content from your game and share that out to the world somehow. So for example, if you have a high score that you want to share with your social network, or if you have a certain achievement that you've achieved and you want to brag about that to your friends, or if you want to ask for help by taking a snapshot of a certain part of the screen and then asking for help of your friends on how to solve that, or showing them the problem that you see in your game at the moment. So here I am launching Adera, which is another example of a beautiful game by Microsoft Studios that's in the store now. And Adera is a hidden object type game that has beautiful scenery and different kinds of puzzles that you can solve to advance in the game. This is a great example of a game that's taken advantage of the share contract, and I'll show you that right now. So for example, if I swipe in from the right and tap on share, you can see these are all the available share targets that I can share content from Adera to other applications that have registered themselves as share targets. So for example, Puzzle Touch, which is the game that I played earlier, is one of those. I can tap on that, select the difficulty level, and now I have a new puzzle available for me in Puzzle Touch. So if I launch Puzzle Touch, you'll see the exact same screen or scene as a puzzle. So that's an example of two applications working together really beautifully without the developers having to add extra code in their application. Another case of share being taken advantage of here is I recently installed Fresh Paint on my new laptop here, and when Adera was developed, they didn't even imagine that I would be able to use this application to paint on the images of the screen. This is also a great example of how they've used touch interaction to let me navigate around the different scenes in this game and solve the different puzzles and progress in the game. Once I achieve an achievement, I can also share that out to my friends through my social network or through email, which gets other players involved in the game, either helping me or playing the game themselves. This is also an example of additional engagement that you can get through the use of contracts. Now, games have had settings for a long time, so that's not new. But what's new in Windows 8 is that users will expect to find them all from the same place by swiping in from the side. This is where you can arrange the different settings into logical groups, like audio and video, or your privacy policy should be here, or help if you want. This is also where you might have the ability to log into a gamer service, or put your developers' credits up there and thank all the team for a great job. Once you tap on one of the groups, you'll bring in the specific settings for that group. So here, for example, is audio, and you might have sliders for the different volumes, or toggle switches, or pull-down menus, depending on what you want. And these should all work interactively so that the users can see the effect that it has on the game in real time without having to make a change, go back, see the effect, make a change again, go back and see the effect. And there's an opportunity here to have a common look and feel to these settings, like many of the Windows Store apps, or you can have a customized experience, which is something that follows the branding and the look and feel of your game however you wish. Okay, awesome, thanks. So there's an example that I wanted to show you of the different kinds of settings that you can have. For example, Solitaire uses the Windows 8 style settings, which are very similar to the ones you see here on the screen. And Reckless Racing uses a very customized type of settings options, which really conform beautifully to the brand of the game. Some of the bad examples that we've seen, developers trying to put settings on the screen itself with a button on the screen, which is really not necessary because A, it takes up that primary real estate that we're trying to reserve for the content of the game, and B, it's going to be available in the settings contract in the Charms bar, where I think most Windows 8 users will expect to find them from now on. So hopefully by now you've seen some of the commercials on TV or some demonstrations, or you've experienced it yourself, that Windows 8 is a true multitasking operating system with the capability of having more than one experience going on at the same time. We call this the different view states. So full screen is the game is occupying the entire screen with no borders, no menus, no edges around it. Basically has every pixel to itself. This is awesome. And then we have the little narrow 320 pixel wide experience that we call snapped view. Snapped view is great for secondary type of activities or things that are not up front and center. There's an opportunity to be a passive type of experience. So for example, if you're familiar with the game Jetpack Joyride, they have the little scientists running around just sort of looking for things. It's really entertaining and fun. And there's opportunities for a more active type of snapped experience. For example, Solitaire, the game that I showed you earlier, can be fully played in snapped view. So this is great when you want to have a secondary activity and a primary activity. So maybe you're watching a movie or some feed of information that you're waiting for, and then playing Solitaire on the side at the same time. So here I have Solitaire in full screen, and I can snap this off to the side as a secondary experience. It is fully functional. I can continue to play the game while I'm viewing the website here that I'm looking at. This is a great opportunity for multiple engagements at the same time, and it works really well. Okay, the next thing to talk about is view states. Except this doesn't work anymore. Oh, there we go. Okay, thanks. So hopefully by now you've seen some of the commercials on TV or some demonstrations, or you've experienced it yourself, that Windows 8 is a true multitasking operating system with the capability of having more than one experience going on at the same time. We call this the different view states. So full screen is the game is occupying the entire screen with no borders, no menus, no edges around it. Basically has every pixel to itself. This is awesome. And then we have the little narrow 320 pixel wide experience that we call snapped view. Snapped view is great for secondary type of activities or things that are not up front and center. There's an opportunity to be a passive type of experience. So for example, if you're familiar with the game Jetpack Joyride, they have the little scientists running around just sort of looking for things. It's really entertaining and fun. And there's opportunities for a more active type of snapped experience. For example, Solitaire, the game that I showed you earlier, can be fully played in snapped view. So this is great when you want to have a secondary activity and a primary activity. So maybe you're watching a movie or some feed of information that you're waiting for, and then playing solitaire on the side at the same time. The filled view is the primary experience when there's snap next to it. So whatever the resolution of your screen is, minus 320 pixels, that's the size of filled view. And that's where you'd have a primary experience, for example, play the game itself, or watch a movie, and so on. Typically, that space is a 4:3 aspect ratio, as opposed to the full screen, which is typically a 16:9 or 16:10 aspect ratio. So these are just things that you should consider when designing your game, because the 3 view states, snapped, filled, and full, are mandatory for certification. There's a 4th view state, which is portrait. It is optional, but there are some games that lend themselves really, really well to portrait. For example, Pinball Effects 2 plays really well on a portrait orientation because it feels like an actual pinball machine. That's the kind of dimensions of the pinball machine. One of the things to think about, though, however, for all of these view states is if you have controls in the app bar, those might need to be readjusted, because as the space changes, you might have less room for controls there. Another thing to consider is if you're supporting rotation, so going from portrait to landscape, you have to keep in mind that the animation of that rotation is handled by the OS itself. And so you want to be careful that you don't, you're playing with me, I don't like it. And so you want to be careful that the game isn't interrupted, or the player isn't interrupted in an unexpected kind of way. So that's where pausing the game could come into play. So you want to pause the game for many different types of reasons. For example, if the user swipes in one of the different affordances from the OS, like a contracts bar or app bar, or a different application from the side covering the entire game altogether. Imagine you have your game running, the user swipes to check some mail, and then comes back and finds that their player died, or they lost the mission, or whatever. So that's not a good experience. So registering for any of these loss of focus or loss of view events, and then pausing the game automatically on behalf of the user is great. And you can also register for the escape key and trigger a pause event at that point, which is kind of the typical PC gaming usage of the escape key to pause. When the game is paused, you want to show the user that it is paused, so some sort of affordance for that, either text or a label or the international pause symbol, which is the 2 lines going up and down. And then give them an affordance to resume the game. So either toggling that switch, toggling that control, or pressing some other type of control, which will get them playing again. In some games where there is a sensitivity to restarting the game, you might want to give them a countdown to give them an opportunity to get ready to start playing, rather than just jumping right in and continuing to play without them being ready. Another thing to think about while the game is paused is if you're a time-sensitive puzzle type of game, you might want to cover the screen so that users can't cheat and try to solve the puzzle while the game is paused, and then resume, solve the puzzle, and then they have a really great score because the time was so little. So it's up to you to decide how you're going to handle this situation based on the game that you have, based on the typical experiences that you want to deliver through that game. Now, because the operating system handles different applications in a very power-efficient kind of way, we're constantly encouraging people to make sure that they save things in the background and manage what we call state, which is handled by the process lifetime management part of the operating system. Because that's already part of what you need to do anyway for the application, there's a great opportunity to take advantage of this and roam that state, roam all those characteristics of the game across different devices. We expect people to have more than one device. I do. I'm sure many of you do. And you might be playing a game at home on your PC, and then you have to take a bus somewhere, perhaps to a meeting or to visit with someone, and you can continue playing that game on your mobile device, on your tablet or on your laptop, but because the state roamed from one device to the other. There might be some options and settings that users set up really specifically that is a characteristic of how they want that game to be played. That's something that you can roam across different devices as well, so people don't have to set things up more than once. Some of those things might be like their identity, for example. And so one of the things that are really great is the ability to connect to gaming services to track your identity and track your achievements and your high score and things like that. Games can use these type of services to also connect between different players, to have matches between them and challenges between different players who want to play the same game. Now, of course, you can build your own capability of this gaming service yourself with the features that are available on the platform. However, there's also some great ones available out there that you can take advantage of. Here you can see I am connected to the Xbox Live service on Windows 8, which is really exciting, and there's a lot of great Xbox Live enabled games coming up into the store. You can also take advantage of the fact that the operating system can federate between different IDs. So for example, here, my Microsoft ID is connected to my Xbox Live gamer tag. And so when I log into a device using my Microsoft ID and then play an Xbox Live enabled game, the operating system automatically connects those two for me and logs me into the Xbox Live service without me having to do anything. This is also great for cases where you have some type of commerce set up for that service, and then having purchases or downloadable content available without having to ask for the user's credentials or their credit card number again. So we've talked about a bunch of different things. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to show you as many as I wanted to, but there are some next steps that you can take to really think about how Windows 8 features and design principles can light up your game, how these design principles can be taken advantage of in the way that most suits the game that you want to make. There's a bunch of other sessions going on today and throughout Build that I encourage you to go check out to learn more about game development or about graphics-intensive applications on Windows 8. And then, of course, there's a lot of great information on MSDN. Much of this content is documented there now. We've updated it, of course, for Build again. And I encourage you to take a look at the new devices coming out and figure out what those types of experiences mean to your game. That's it. Thanks very much. We can take some questions now. Are there any questions? Yeah?
It's going to show my own experience, but a little confused about what is the difference between a Windows 8 game and a Windows 8 Xbox game?
The question was, what's the difference between a Windows 8 game and a Windows Xbox game?
Oh, Windows 8 Xbox, or when you're playing an Xbox game on a Windows 8 device. Well, I noticed, for instance, on the start menu, some of the tiles had Xbox over them, some did not.
Right. So Xbox Live enabled games are games that take advantage of the Xbox Live service on Windows 8. They're also typically curated by the Microsoft publisher. In other words, they're game developers who develop games and then Microsoft publishes them on their behalf. The difference between them technically is very little. They're all Windows 8 applications that have gone through certification and have the capabilities and features of a Windows 8 application, except that Xbox Live enabled games also tap into the gaming service.
Okay, so it's not that you have an Xbox game running on Windows
Correct.
8, but an Xbox Live connected game.
It's the service, right? Yeah.
These games, I've had some experience with XNA, just playing with that stuff. Now, how does that translate to Windows 8 phones? Are these more C++ programming, or is it the XNA type of library that you can use?
So the question is, how does this relate to XNA development on the phone or previous versions of Windows or the Xbox. And so XNA was really influential in how we designed the new APIs for Windows 8. So the WinRT API has several different languages and that you can choose to develop your game in. The C# approach is probably the closest to XNA. But there's also the ability to write HTML5 and JavaScript games or C++, DirectX games. All three of those work in a beautiful way.
Is there any performance in any applications you're using C# as opposed to C++?
Typically, the performance difference in the code is negligible, but the graphics might be a little bit different because in the DirectX case, you're going directly to the hardware for the speeding up of the graphics, whereas in XAML, it's going through a thin interpretation layer.
I actually had a very similar question. I found that the C# XAML is not very well suited for games because it's much more like event-oriented around like XAML objects. And so my question is actually if you have any news on XNA, because it really fills that slot of the ease of development in C#, whereas having the performance, it's not like an app-driven model, but more of a game-driven model. And HTML doesn't have threading. It has a lot of limitations that XNA let us work around.
So there's a trade-off, of course. And then if you want the most low latency and the highest performance and the most performance and flexibility, and C++ and DirectX is the way to go. But there are a lot of game types that really lend themselves well to XAML and C#, puzzle games, word-type games, things that aren't that intensive from a time lag point of view. Yes?
You talked about notifications and pop-up notes. What is the approach towards cross-applications? The concurrent applications are running in the background and pop up something while you're playing?
Yeah. So the question is about notifications and how those apply to concurrent applications running in the background. I'll answer that in a second. If there are other questions, please form a line behind the microphone so we can get the questions heard by everybody, and then there'll be a line, and then I won't have to make people feel bad about not picking them. So applications that are running in the background technically can pop up notifications, but we prefer to reserve that for very specific cases. And so typically, notifications are used in-game, in the application while it's running. That's sort of considered the best practice on the platform at the moment.
The concern is, I've seen in forums that developers are concerned about other applications kind of barging in and ruining the immersive experience.
Yeah. So if you're gonna watch a 2-hour movie, there's a quick setting that you can set to just turn off all the notifications, and you won't be bothered by anything. There are other ways to determine which applications can pop up notifications or which applications can't. There's actually quite a lot of control over how you manage the notifications. Yes?
Hi, I had another question. For future games, I'm trying to decide between using a C# with Unity, C++ with DirectX, or I also didn't know if C# could be used with DirectX. I'm kind of fond of C#, but I didn't know if that precludes me from using DirectX. So part of my question is that even an option? And my other question is, Unity offers, another middleware, offers a lot of advantages, but under what conditions would one get some additional benefit by going directly to DirectX?
So there's a bunch of questions there. I'll answer them all. Hopefully I won't miss any. So C# and DirectX are possible to use together. There are third-party libraries like SharpDX that you can use. In fact, some of the games that I was going to demonstrate to you today use that process. And so that's something we know will work. We know it'll be certifiable in the store. And so that's fine. If you really want to get the closest to the metal as possible and have the most control and flexibility over features and really, programmable shaders and take advantage of the different hardware characteristics of GPUs, then C++ and DirectX is really the way to go. That's, for example, how Unity built their engine for Windows 8 in DirectX and C++ to provide the game development pipeline, really, from beginning to end that they have, which then eventually lets you submit your app to the store, which is really cool.
Thank you.
In the back, yeah.
For the startup experience where you suggested having an animation there so it goes by faster, what is the best way to do that? Can you do it with the C# and XAML animations, or should you do that separately while resources are being loaded in the background?
So once the application received control from the OS, you basically own the display surface. You can do with it what you want. So you can display an image, or you can run an animation or show a video clip. There's some applications in the store that do that, which is really cool. There's a little bit of a thing that you need to think about, which is the trade-off between power and resources going to play that animation that will go against loading the assets that you need to start the game. So a little bit of thought going into that, a little bit of testing on different devices is probably a good idea to determine what the best experience is.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
When you're thinking of new games and ideas, how do you avoid infringing on other people's digital right, copyright and all that? How does if I'm thinking of a game and I have no idea there's another game out there that uses this fancy whatever and I'm making it, is there something you think about when you're designing a game to not step on anybody's toes?
Angry Birds is taken. I don't have any specific advice I can give you. I mean, it's probably a good idea to do a search and look at what's available in the store. There's also the ability to reserve an app name. So once you're a registered developer, if you have an idea for a name that you want, you can reserve that name. If it's available, you'll be successful in reserving it. If it's not available, you won't be able to reserve it. Yeah, in the front?
Yeah, so people who are interested in XNA today, they should really check out Monogame. That team has really done an awesome work of wrapping around SharpDX and exposing actually the same namespaces as XNA has done in the Windows Phone. Honestly, it took me 4 hours to get a Windows Phone 7 XNA game running on Windows 8 without any knowledge whatsoever in Git or Monogame when I started.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, there's actually a wealth of third-party frameworks that are coming on board now. Monogame is one of them. It depends on the type of game you're trying to create. There might be ones that are more appropriate for different type of genres. But, Windows is an open ecosystem. We welcome all the different kinds of applications and game development middleware. So we expect to see them all pop up within the next few months. In the back?
Yeah, I have a question regarding the Unity 3D engine. So basically, I wanted to see how easy it would be to be able to develop games using the Unity 3D engine and be able to basically target both Windows 8 and also Windows Phone.
With Unity?
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Is there going to be any sessions throughout the...
Yes, there is. I think it's on Thursday. If you look at the schedule, there's one of the case studies is bringing Unity games to the phone and to Windows 8 using the framework. It's awesome.
All right, thank you.
I think we're getting kicked out, so I'll be in. Where am I going? I'm going somewhere for half an hour. I don't know where that is. Do you know where that is, Keith? Yes. So I'm happy to take more questions outside. We'll let them set up for the next session here. Thank you very much.